Welcome to Frisky Talk 16 with Forerunners. With releases and remixes on notable labels including Pure Progressive, Perfecto, and Sudbeat, his tracks have been on the decks of some of the biggest names in the scene. His ability to create a journey in his smooth, flowing style makes for a distinctive sound that's definitively Forerunners. His story of how he first got into electronic music is a familiar one, and it was such a pleasure to hear about the path he's taken to living a life now fully intertwined with music. His thoughtfulness and thoughts on life are wonderfully valuable, as well as his advice on the production process, finding your sound, and diversifying your style. I know there's much in store for Forerunners in the future, and I'm grateful to have been able to take this time to learn from him. I hope you all enjoy listening. This is Frisky Talk 16 with Forerunners.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good, sweet. Well, thanks for taking the time. It's good to catch up with you.
I want to start by getting to know you a little better. Like, how did you start getting into DJing, like knowing that you wanted to do that for yourself?
I mean, I had actually played music most of my life. I had done the whole... I actually played trumpet in school, and so I was the band nerd. Yeah, when I was younger, I was the band nerd, and so I kind of had a background of music. My parents were music lovers. They weren't like in bands or anything, but they were exposed to a lot of music. My mom actually did work in the record industry back in the day, so she had a big passion and a collection of music and was always listening to music. So just being exposed to it at a young age for a long time, and then I think it was actually after I had matured a little bit and I was listening to this electronic music, because I had never thought of myself as like someone who'd play music in a band, for example. Like, I wasn't going to play guitar like my friends were doing. It wasn't that I didn't want to, or I didn't respect it. It was just like, I don't know, it just didn't feel like something I would do. And so once I got into this electronic music, I realized for some reason it feels like something I could do. And I didn't realize what the DJs were doing behind the decks at that point. I thought, it was just magic happening, and with them playing like music and stuff. Yeah. And especially with the Crystal Method, you see the Crystal Method, and they have all this gear up there, and so it's very confusing when you don't know what it is. And eventually, I kind of learned that they're mixing records, and I said I could do that. That shouldn't be that bad. And at that point, eBay was around, so it was easy to just jump on eBay and find some dirt cheap CD players and some old record players and stuff, and just kind of play around and have fun. And that's what I did. Was I just picked up some very cheap gear and just was kind of playing with it, just having fun. This was back when Beatport was like not even around yet, and I think there were some other download sites you could jump on, and of course the peer-to-peer stuff was happening. And then Beatport eventually did show up on the scene. It was very limited. I remember even at a time when they weren't like the top dog. I mean, that was a long time ago. And so yeah, it was just kind of having fun. It was never anything serious. It was just like another hobby. Like I love to play sports and read books and do all sorts of different things, go hiking, and it was just like one of those other things that I did for fun. And I think that was kind of like a new thing for me to kind of delve into music like that, because prior, growing up playing music, I never took it very seriously. Like I never wanted to experiment with it. It was like, here's the sheet music, stick it in front of you, play it well, practice it, and then go home and take a break, and that was that. Or practice it, and then you have a big concert, and then you can forget about it and put it out of your mind, almost like doing math in school. And DJing was more like hey, there's no strings attached, there's no rules, just kind of have fun and see what you can do with it. And so that was a new thing for me to kind of start doing that.
I love that. That's
with music.
Yeah, that's I love that idea of just that you're just playing with it instead of having like to fit in any rules. When did you decide to like play, at a venue, like in front of people?
Oh man, that was many years later. It wasn't so much a decision as it was an opportunity, really. Yeah. So the transition to go from DJing to writing music actually happened pretty quick, because it was like the first couple of years I was messing around with CD players, and I was recording my sets and putting them up on like online radio stations. Like if they would take my mix, I'd hand it to them. And so I was doing that, and it didn't take long for me to kind of start telling myself, okay, well, I can write the music, can't I? And so it was a pretty quick jump from like DJing to writing music, and they kept kind of going hand in hand. Like in my mind, it was just like the perfect complement. Like if you're DJing and you want the perfect track next and you don't have it because you can't buy it in a store or somebody can't send it to you as a promo, then you do it yourself. And so it was just that perfect complement. And so pretty quick I started writing music, and I feel like the first big excitement wasn't so much trying to get a gig or play live. So yeah, like not to get a question around on you, but like that was the first big motivation, was like legitimacy. Like, do people actually want to hear my mixes? Do people actually want to hear my music? And that came first. So even though I've been DJing and really like practicing my craft, I signed a record to John O'Berg a long time ago, and that label is long gone. And Armin van Buuren picked it up and played it on his radio show, and that was like the first like,
wow,
my stuff's out in front of a lot of people. That was kind of a time like, okay, I'm good, I'm happy, this is exciting.
Yeah.
My work is in front, whether it's a DJ mix or a song, like my work is in front of people, then it's not just like some friends or something. Like this is legitimately like in front of people. And so I guess that's why I say like, I wasn't really pushing hard to try to get gigs or pushing hard to really do anything in particular. But once that happened, when somebody picked up one of my tracks and played it like that, that was like an awakening for me.
Well, awesome. So that kind of happened just like you putting your stuff out, not really with any expectation, just to see if people would like it.
Yeah, and I think like because it happened so quick, like it was, and I'm not trying to say like quick, like I had this natural gift and oh my gosh, I just was signing music right off the bat. It was just more like I started DJing, and not too long after I started writing music. It wasn't like I spent 10 years DJing and got into clubs and then finally decided to write music like some people do. It was just like DJ, right into writing music, and then it just happened that the first opportunity I had to get in front of people was my music was being played by other big name DJs rather than me playing it like in front of a crowd. So for years, to kind of actually answer your question, for years I didn't play gigs. I just focused on living life, and then music was a hobby that was very rewarding. Looking back, I was like 18 years old and not really taking it very seriously, so I kicked a lot of opportunities to the side thinking, they'll never go away. And of course those opportunities did go away, and that's okay. I mean, I don't have any salty feelings about that. It is what it is. And so I just kind of kept operating that way of, I've got real life and then I've got my hobbies. And so music was just one of those hobbies. It wasn't something that I was pursuing as like, this is my life and this is what I'm going to do. Not that I wouldn't want to do that. It was just at the time, it's just, the culture around you, especially when you're going to college and you've got friends that don't understand what you're doing. And like you said earlier in your question, like you don't have that support around you. You don't have that network. It just doesn't make sense to say, yeah, I'm just going to dive into the deep end right here. And that's so I didn't. I just kind of stuck with keeping it as a hobby. And so for a long time, I didn't get any gigs, didn't do much else other than just sign music here and there. And even then, I wasn't signing a lot. It was like one release a year, so it was a very slow drip. And so my first legitimate actual gig was ADE.
Nice.
It's kind of a jump.
Wow. Yeah, like here you go.
Yeah. So
were you still playing though? Like a lot, like would you still like DJ for yourself often, or like just making mixes for radio and stuff? Or?
Yeah, I think luckily that's an interest that's kind of stayed alive for me. Like I have never become bored with it. I mean, I started with CD players and turntables, and that's like a whole world in its own. And then gosh, like 5 or 6 years ago, I jumped into Traktor and bought all the gadgets that go with that, like the MIDI controllers and things you can do. And so that became a whole other world. And so I've kind of kept that interest going. And so even though I find that I dedicate more of my time to writing music, like doing the mixes is still like, it's still something I like to enjoy. I enjoy doing. I like putting it together. I like recording them. And then now with the opportunity these last couple of years of doing live gigs and seeing that increase, it's become like a whole other game, which is definitely like a new level. Like it's more rewarding for sure to see that instant feedback in like a live situation.
Nice. Would you consider doing like live, integrating like a lot of live into your DJ sets, like producing, playing?
hmm I'm not there yet. So with Traktor, I'm sure, I mean, everybody says this all the time. It almost becomes stereotypical, like, oh, you can do remixes on the fly. And it's true. I mean, you definitely can. And so I've played with that a little bit. But that's as far as I've gone. I think right now my focus is still what can I put together in the studio that I can then bring out to a live situation. And so if I'm playing a gig for 2 or 3 hours, can it be maybe 75%
Nice.
of my own work?
Yeah.
Not that I haven't stopped digging. Gosh, I spent so much money on music this past month, but the promos keep coming in, the music's still there to buy, so I'm still digging, but there's something different about being able to kind of put your stamp on a set, and the best way you can do that, at least for me, is kind of bringing my own music into the mix. And so that's my focus right now. But I gotta say, it's pretty exciting. I mean, I think back to the days when I got to see Crystal Method live and some of these other guys play live. And even now when you see some of these guys, show up and play a live set, I mean, that's so much freedom. And if the people are there and they're into it and they're into like kind of experiencing that experimentation that's going to happen live, I mean, why not? That'd be pretty amazing to do. So maybe in the future.
Well, I love that idea still though, of having it, being able to do like the full gamut of like energy and like journey of a DJ set all with your own tracks is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's no big secret. I used to write more of the uplifting like France style, and I think, again, being younger, I think it was exciting to imagine like, okay, this track's going to be a peak time track and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be all this energy. And then, 3 months later, you're sitting in the studio like, all right, this track's going to be a peak time track and it's going to be amazing. Almost like you're racing against, it's like an arms race against yourself. Like, how much bigger can I make it?
Yeah.
And that wears itself out pretty quick. At least it did for me. It wore itself out. And so now you just hit the nail on the head. It's like this really fun, like challenge of maybe these next couple tracks I write, just because of the mood I'm in, they're more of like an early hours or maybe an after hours or maybe like the middle of a set where you're building the energy, just, different places to put your music. And I find that a lot more interesting when I'm sitting in the studio with different styles that I can kind of attack.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense because depending on your mood, it's not always going to be one of those peak times. And I see how you could wear yourself out having to feel that, like you have to have that energy every time you get in the studio.
Yep, exactly. And it's like I said, it definitely wears you out when you're trying to do the same thing. And I think this style of music as well, just the way techno and progressive house have been over the years, and just house music in general, it just gives you that flexibility. I mean, you go listen to the list of progressive house DJs that are out there these days, and they really do stand apart. There's a wide spectrum of what you'd consider progressive house, and I think that it's a nice freedom that we have in that style of music.
Nice. How would you think they stand apart from like other genres? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean actually within. And again, everybody always says this. I hate to put names on genres or try to classify music, and I agree with that sentiment. But just generally speaking, if we were going to say progressive house, and we look at the household names of the progressive house scene, a lot of them have a very distinctive style that they're going for. You know, if you're going to a Lost and Found event, if you're going to see Sid Inc., if you're going to see Darren Epsilon, if you're going to do All Day I Dream, which technically is, you got a little bit of deep house in there, of course, and so you've got these different feels, and it's really exciting to see that. And they're not trying to necessarily compete with each other. They're all doing their own. They're kind of going off on their own trail, their own path. Even pure progressive, with what Solarstone's doing with his sub-label here that I've been releasing on. It's like a whole other little world that still falls within the progressive house genre, and it's kind of nice to see that freedom, that expressiveness, rather than if I'm going to a particular event, like maybe a drum and bass event, where it's going to be slamming the whole night. And you know, that also could be some of my ignorance. I mean, I'm not as big a drum and bass fan, for example, but you know, typically you're going to a drum and bass event, it's going to be fast paced, a little bit more energy than, let's say, progressive house night. But you can definitely hear like a wider range. I feel like you can get like a real slow sub 120 BPM set out of a progressive house guy, and you can get a guy pushing 130 by the end of the night, no problem. And I think it speaks to that freedom.
So what then did you feel like there's a point where you knew you'd be taking it more seriously? Like you said, you know, you're kind of doing one track a year, not really focusing. Mm-hmm. Was there a turning point, or?
Definitely. Yeah, there was actually. I think it was, I'm so bad with remembering dates, but I think it was around. Yeah, I think it was like 2013. I actually could probably jump on my Beatport discography or my Discogs and go check this out, and it would jog my memory. I feel like it was around 2013, 2014. The well was dry. Like, there were lots of projects on the hard drive, but they just weren't inspiring anything in me to continue. And I think I had maybe done a couple remixes here and there that I just was not happy with when I was done. And I just I didn't just like vocally say to myself, I give up. It was just more like, you know what? I'm going to go back to living life. I'm going to do other stuff. Music's still there, but it's not going to be a big priority anymore. Not that it was ever like the number one priority, but it was a big part of my life. Kind of put it to the side. I got married. I had a home. We made a home together. We got a couple dogs. You kind of start to live life. You kind of get away from it a little bit. I was still listening to music, but it was just kind of like in the background. And then I feel like it was around 2015 or so, a couple years later, my wife kind of smacked me upside the head and said, this is something that was such a big part of your life for you. I mean, it still is. Like, you listen to it, you talk about it, you reminisce about it. Why have you kind of stepped away from it? You should really just kind of re-explore and get back into the studio and see what you can do. And so I did, except when I did that, I kind of went in with a purpose this time, and that was the change. Because back when I was younger, it was just kind of like, I'm having fun, I can write this because I think I can write it, let's see where it goes. Now it was like, all right, I'm gonna have fun, I'm gonna write stuff that I love, but I'm gonna find a sound that I can call my own, that's my own identity. If it ends up being played by a bunch of trance guys, okay, so be it. If it goes into the progressive house scene, okay. If it goes into like some weird other genre, whatever it might be, that's fine too. It was just like, let's see what I can do and break away from what I used to do. And that's when I signed the first EP to Saturate, which was a really friendly label. I'm still in touch with those guys all the time. And it shot to #1 on the release chart on Beatport. And it was just like, wow, okay, maybe I've got something here. Because it was a sound that I appreciated, that I respected of my own, that I was happy with, that I was content with, that I was going to say, all right, I wouldn't change anything about this. And from that point on, back in 2015, it's just been kind of like onward, up and upward. Just what can I do to push the boundaries more for myself, can I make it sound better? What kind of fun exploration I can do? What labels can I work with? What artists can I work with? And that's just how it's gone ever since then. So definitely a big credit to my wife for waking me up. And, hey,
Good woman.
slipping away. Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, that's great. And I hear people often say that as advice, even it being or like a challenge that they've gone through is trying to produce music for a specific label or trying to fit in, and for you to be like, I'm just going to write what feels right to me, is obviously falls into that, that theory that writing what's best for you is what people actually want to hear instead of trying to fit in. So it's very interesting to hear that.
Yeah, definitely can be a challenge, and it's a challenge I think everyone at some point goes through, because they say, all right, I think I have the opportunity to get on XYZ label and they're a significant player and they can really boost my profile. And so, no, you're not necessarily selling out, but are you maybe kind of massaging some things? Are you changing some things that you normally wouldn't do to make sure you fit that sound? And it's kind of funny because I was laughing with a buddy of mine we were chatting over Messenger, and I sent him a sample of a track I've been working on just a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, where the heck would I send this? Like, I don't know. Like, even now, like, after I've been working with labels now for the last few years and I have some relationships out there, it's just like, I don't know. Like, it's not so much that the track is like weird and crazy. It's just, it doesn't quite, at least for me, fit into like a perfect slot of some label that I already know. And so that makes me happy. Like, it's kind of cool because it means who knows where it's going to go. It might land on some label that I never even thought that I'd even work with, and all sorts of new opportunities spring up from that.
True. You never know where it'll go. And you also obviously have like that ambient world. Like, is that something that you pursue on the side at all?
Yeah, I credit Rich Solarstone for that, because way back in the day, back when he was running Deep Blue Records, he loved to do an ambient version of all the releases. So if you were coming to him with a club track, he might have like another artist do a remix, like a standard remix package, and then he'd say, all right, now do a beatless version for me for like a chill out. And so he kind of pushed me to do that on a couple tracks, and then I realized, wow, this is pretty awesome. And so I've never like focused fully into it except for maybe a few tracks, and they've never been, well, a couple of those old tracks have definitely been released, but I've got some tracks nowadays that I have kind of saved in the background that I haven't fully released them, and I have been getting some interest in them, and people have been bugging me to put them out. So I think it's definitely a route I might go, but it wouldn't be in place of anything else. It'd be just kind of like an extra side project for sure, because I think I listen to a lot of ambient. I do. But that's like a whole other world as well. So I haven't. Time these days is limited, as for everybody. So
yeah.
I wish I could do that all the time, but yeah, it's going to have to be like something that kind of slowly ruminates for me, or slowly builds, and maybe I'll put some stuff out eventually.
What's your timing like then? Do you set yourself, like, do you force yourself studio time to go in to be dedicated to it, or is it always just in the moment?
That's a good question. That's another one that I was having a long conversation with my buddy about. It's so common now that you're working like a 9-to-5 job, and then music's kind of like sucking up whatever free time you have, and that's what it's turned into, is that any downtime, it's almost like you just automatically, your thoughts go to, oh, I can jump in the studio. So if it's 2 hours like on a Thursday night with suddenly freed up where you're like, you don't have any obligations or anything to do, I'm gonna run into the studio. And sometimes it almost gets to the point where you're like, you have to remind yourself, well, there's other things that I could do with that free time as well, not just music. So yeah, I don't have like a set schedule. It's more of just, if I can find free time, I'm jumping in there. I've learned, for myself at least, I can't just flip on creativity. I'm sure you've probably heard that before. A lot of people kind of have to figure that formula out for themselves. So there are times where I think, oh, wow, I've got a Saturday coming up and it's just going to be me and the dogs, and I can just chill in the studio and like get some blocks of time in, and it ain't happening that day. Just creativity is not coming. So you find something else to work on and you go do something else. So I found that trying to schedule out like a few days in advance and trying to figure out some studio time just doesn't work so great. But I've been able to kind of go with the flow and pick up free time where I can and just kind of work it into my everyday life, and it's worked out so far.
Oh, nice. Well, that's good. I know it'd be hard if you're like ever feeling under pressure for time or anything like that, but that's something that you don't have to worry about. Do you always feel like you set yourself enough time to work? Any obligations from, remixes and things like that?
That's a great question. That's a great follow-up question. I always warn labels. It's like my first question when a label approaches me with a remix: what does your calendar look like? Like, first of all, do I like the song? Is it something I can work with? Blah, 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 blah. But then next question is like, all right, what kind of a timetable? And I almost always warn them I'm a little slow. So that's kind of my only tool at this point. Is I try to book out remixes like a solid 6 months if I can, which seems a little extreme, but it gives me that chance to, because what will happen is it's so easy to say yes to like 3 remixes in a row, and then now your next 4 months roughly is booked solid if you're really going to work hard on those remixes. And oh yeah, you forgot you've got originals you're trying to work on too. Well, those are going to have to get pushed to the wayside because now you have contracted work that you've got an obligation to. So it's kind of a balance. You kind of learn that, all right, I need at least a long timetable. And then unfortunately, I do turn down remixes these days just because of the fact that I'm not going to have the time. And I want to make sure I'm giving the label, big or small, the best I can give them. So that's kind of what I've been doing, is pushing those deadlines out, communicating as much as I can with the label so that there's no missed expectations or anything like that. And that's actually worked pretty well this last year. I haven't had any like freak out last minute moments. I had to stress about like, oh crap, this is due next week, and like the release date's set, so I can't miss it. Like, that's not fun. So I've been able to avoid that.
No, that's good. That's good to know that to not put yourself in those situations, and to put that up front and be honest, which I'm sure works out best for everyone.
Yes.
So what then do you feel like are some of your greatest challenges, or like the hardest part for you for writing tracks?
Producing in general, it comes down to just time, which we kind of touched on. Just because you might get a half hour in one evening to work, and that half hour could be very productive, but a lot of times that's not good enough, because right at a half hour mark, you start getting into the flow. Things start kind of happening, and now it's like, nope, got to shut it down. I got to go to bed, or I got other things to deal with. So just overall, I think that's always the challenge, and that goes for everyone, not just producers. Obviously, we're all fighting time, but when it comes to actually writing, like, so if time isn't an issue and I have plenty of time in front of me, probably arrangement. Just arranging a track. I was, again, talking to another friend about this, where you could sit and just write ideas all day. I mean, once you learn your synthesizers and your tools, and everyone can kind of do that over time, it becomes a little bit easier to just throw up a sequence of notes or throw up some chords and kind of mix and match and mess with them, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this kind of sounds cool. But now to say, all right, this sounds cool, and then now it's like an actual 8-minute club track that, so-and-so would play, at some big event, like, that's a whole other story. And I find that I can build a groove, no problem. I can get a melody going. I can get bass lines running. I can get the effects running, and that's a lot of fun. But now it's arrangement. And the arrangement, of course, is the build-up and the decrease of energy and the movement of the synthesizers and the music, and having it all fit together as like kind of like a puzzle, and coming together and making it sound right so that expectations are met. So when people are listening to it and dancing to it, they can feel it happening. That's a challenge. We got a track I just finished where I was asking a buddy of mine, I was having him listen to it. I said, is it lagging? Where do you feel like something just feels off to me? And so the track's done. I mean, it's absolutely done. The mixdown's done. It's ready for a label, but there's just something about it where you just feel something lagging here or there. And so it can be hard to pinpoint, like, what do I need to do? Is there something I should do? Maybe I'm just in my head and there's really nothing wrong with the track. So that, spend, days, hours, months, weeks, however long you want, trying to tweak that final feel to the track before you're ready to let it go, and that's a challenge, I think, and that's really what sets people apart. And I think that's where sometimes the guys that have that natural talent, you can tell, because they can just throw tracks out like once a month, and they're just constantly putting out new. They just have it in them to be able to like nail the arrangement, and I think that's something that I work a lot on. So that can be challenging.
Yeah, that's great. I don't hear about that enough, but that's absolutely like the feel that you're getting from it. Do you ever have that feel like you just said, you feel like there's something missing? Like, do you most of the time feel like you know when a track is like it's done and good, or do you have to like force yourself to just let it go?
It's nowadays, with X number of years behind me now of writing music, I have a better sense of it. It's not perfect. I mean, I still, so my track Just for a While, which came out, I guess it was last year, and I got some pretty big support on that, which was exciting. I thought that track needed a lot of cleaning up. and I'm not saying like I released it unfinished. Like, yeah. I was happy with the final product, but it was actually, there's a little bit of pressure on that one actually, because it was needed for a compilation. It was like there was a deadline. If I had had more time, I would have spent more time on it. With that being said, when I gave it to the label, Pure Progressive, they were happy with it. Rich was happy with it, so we were good. I was happy enough. So there are times when I feel like I could probably spend some more time on that. It's not always obvious what's needed in the track, and that's the other challenge with more like progressive or deeper music, like house music. It's much subtler. You don't necessarily have the big cues like a snare roll and a massive super saw and a bunch of compression thrown in your face to tell you, hey, get excited, now's the time to dance. Like, it's not so obvious, and that's what I like about it. I think you can have such like a groove going, and then all of a sudden just a hi-hat drops in at like the perfect time, and the whole place just feels it. And so that's what makes it a little bit more challenging, because that might be all that it takes is you just need a hi-hat, and it needs to be the right hi-hat and at the right volume level at the right time, and bam, it's done. Your track is perfect. And that could be hard to pinpoint sometimes, but I'm getting better at it. I definitely, years of experience kind of serve you better when you're dealing with arrangement, for sure.
Is there something that you would like tell yourself starting out, or maybe, somebody else starting out, that would be, advice that you would give?
When it comes to like writing music,
in general,
the whole thing?
Or hey,
Okay.
anything. I mean, writing music or just getting into it, I don't know, the life aspect of it as well.
Sure. I think patience, and I've heard that actually said by other guys that I admire and respect. And when they said it, and I thought about it, I realized that that actually, that's a big factor. Patience, meaning there's natural excitement, especially when you're writing your own music, to see what kind of a reaction you're going to get for it. I mean, there's a point where, I mean, early on you might be like, oh gosh, my music is terrible, I don't want people to hear it, I'm embarrassed. But eventually, if you stick with it, you're going to get to a point where you're enthused. You're like, oh my gosh, I just finished. I mean, you see guys on Instagram and Facebook all the time, like they haven't even exported the track to like an audio file to MP3 or WAV, and they're like doing a video of the track in their software. Or like, listen to this, guys. Like they're really pumped about it. So that's a genuine feeling. And so to fight that and say, whoa, slow down. Am I doing my best work? Is this ready for a label that I want to send to? Is this ready to be played out at an event? And then also patience with just your career in general. You know, I think it's any pursuit, not just music. You have this dream in the back of your head that, oh, I'm just going to do this little thing and bam, I'm going to make it. You know, I'm going to get signed to the big label, or I'm going to get the big promotion, or whatever it's going to happen. It's going to be like an overnight thing. I'm going to win the lottery. And that certainly does happen. But for most of us, you got to work at it, and it takes time. And I feel like it's actually better that you do that, because you build more of a real good fan base that understands what you're doing. You have a chance to build your sound. And so you embrace that time that you have, enjoy the journey, and be patient with it. And you know, as soon as you export that track to Wave, don't go sending it to the label right away. Give it a couple weeks and listen to it like later. Like don't listen to it for a couple weeks and listen to it. And then maybe even on your DJ mixes, you know, work on them, practice them, listen to them later. Don't be so rushed to try to get it onto Beatport or get into a club, because gosh, every week there's like a million tracks getting released, and so it can seem a little overwhelming, like, oh gosh, I'm falling behind because I'm not putting out music, or I'm falling behind because so and so got a gig and I didn't. But I think it's important to focus on your craft and the quality, and making sure you're doing what you want to do, because then when you do get the chance to release the track, or you do get the chance to play the gig, it's going to be very rewarding, and you're going to be in your zone. Like you're going to be doing what you want. It won't be like you rushed into it and you're not quite sure what you should do. Like you're going to know exactly what you want to do with that time and that opportunity that you have. So patience is a big one. And that is what I would probably pass on to people who are kind of early on in their adventure.
I love that. That's fantastic advice. That's
cool.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's like something I've, wanted to work on in my own life, and had to, like, maybe that's just getting older or something, but like having that, realizing that you can just to sit back and not rush things has always been a challenge for me. And so I really appreciate that advice. That's awesome.
And I can't take all the credit because, like I said, I did hear from other people, but I think it's like stopping and smelling the roses. It's enjoying the journey. It's and again, not just with music, like you just said, in your own life. I mean, I agree, in my own life as well. It's so easy in our culture in this day and age to just be like, everything's flashing in your face. You have to rush to get to things, and your schedule's packed, and so it could be tough to try to unwind a little bit and appreciate where you're at. So yeah,
it's a habit that can help in many ways. So that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So kind of, I'm not sure I can explain this right, but I'm curious, like, do you feel like when you're writing, is it all for yourself and expressing yourself, or is there something where you're trying to maybe like communicate or like hope that people that hear it kind of feel a certain way, a message or something like that?
Good question. I mean, you're definitely writing for yourself, and I mean, I would imagine most. I mean, there are producers, of course, that are writing for like a vocalist or for a pop artist or something, or writing for a band or whatever. Songwriters. Most, I'd say, electronic producers like myself, I think we're writing a little bit for ourselves for sure. I mean, I'm definitely pushing myself when I write a track and trying to see what I can do and what kind of excitement I can bring into my own work, because it's something I love to do. But I wouldn't say there's a message necessarily, but there is a feeling. I mean, I think over the years, people have noticed that Forerunners tends to equate to like atmosphere and mood and melody. And so I think going back to way back when I was listening to, say, Northern Exposure or the Perfecto Flora compilation, or gosh, there's all sorts of music back then that I would listen to, like the early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s of, the progressive house way back, where it was kind of like like a fun, adventurous style where you had melody, but you also had the banging tracks, and you had all these different styles. I think I'm not trying to achieve that, but I think that's influenced me heavily. It's like it's like locked in my brain. So I think that feeling that I feel when I listen to a certain style of music, I'm trying to then pass that along. So when I'm playing in a live gig, we're all kind of feeling that similar vibe. And it's kind of fun because I've noticed, I've played a variety of events. I've played straight up trance events where I'm opening for like a fast-paced trance DJ, and obviously I've played more like progressive events. And you definitely get different crowds, and crowds that are, they have certain expectations. And so you can see that kind of impact of what your music, like your tracks that you've written, have on people with certain expectations and different crowds. And so you can almost see what kind of an impact your music has on different types of people, which is really cool. So I'm being long-winded again, but I don't think there's like a specific message, but there's definitely just a good feeling that I personally remember and recall from listening to, my favorite types of music, and I'm trying to kind of pass that along to people and say, these are the types of sounds I love that make me feel good and make me happy, and I think they will for you too, and that's how the tracks come about.
Totally. I mean, I definitely feel that way listening to your music. It's like what is very appealing about it is it like gives me those feelings of like when I first started out, and what that reminds me of, and it's heartwarming and soul. That that feeling. It's hard to put into words, but I think you do such a great job of that, and it's felt and appreciated. Absolutely.
Thank you. Oh, that's cool. That's good feedback. And I kind of joked with my wife the other day. I was like, am I like too nostalgic sometimes?
No, I know, totally. But I think there's a little bit of the like music's maybe a little too taken a little too seriously sometimes, and it was very playful and experimental. And there wasn't like really these like rules at that point. It was just the start of, we have no idea where this is going, but it's awesome. And so like, that's a good nostalgia of maybe more innocence or something like that.
I agree. Cool.
Anyway, that's not my point to ramble, but I am interested though of just a little bit on your gigs, because you're talking about playing to like the trance crowd and the progressive crowd. So what's some of like your favorite crowds or venues or like moments DJing you've had?
Yeah, I just got asked this question actually too, and I didn't take me long to realize that my favorite was Rich invited me to open for him, the Solar Stone again. He invited me to open for him at a boat party in New York, in Manhattan.
Fun.
And yeah, I mean, it was like, oh, geez. And so flew out there and got on the boat. There was one downer, the fact that they have to like warn everyone that the boat is leaving the dock, which is right Like you might be right in the middle of your set, or maybe
Oh,
it wasn't like when they were leaving the dock. There was something about like there's some warning they had to like by law they have to stop the music and announce it. And of course, everybody thinks your
oh.
set's over at that point, so they start clapping for you. But if I
Funny.
ignore that few minutes, that was pretty amazing because when I'm opening for Rich, he's always been supportive ever since I've known him about whatever I'm doing. Whether it was I came back to him with a bunch of like deeper music or back when I was doing the higher energy stuff. So he basically was like free reign, go for it. You know, don't go crazy, but free reign. And so I get to play like all my favorite stuff and of course my music in front of a sunset on the water at
Oh,
summertime. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So I can't really measure that against other clubs because it's just for me being outdoors is something I like in general, and so that just combined everything perfectly. And the crowd was great. I mean, they were captive on the boat, so hey.
you better be
But
dancing.
I'm kidding. But no, I mean it was really. I haven't had a chance yet to go crazy traveling the world like some of these guys have, but I've definitely played it in some different places like Amsterdam and LA and Toronto and New York now, and so I have experience in different crowds, and so far it's all been good. I mean, it's all been exciting and fun, and people appreciate it. But I would definitely say that boat party stood out, and I would love to do something like that again because it's just any type of open air event would be pretty
Mhm.
amazing. I think.
That's your kind of your jam, the
I guess
outdoor
so, yeah.
living.
And it's not like I don't know. Like I love going to events that are in, like we have some really cool venues that have opened up here in Phoenix, for example, that I've
Nice.
seen some acts at, and they're all indoors, of course. And um, I would say that some of my favorite events I've been to here in Phoenix locally have been indoor events, even though there are some outdoor events as well. But for me, at least personally, it just that was kind of unbeatable. So yeah, having the elements out there was pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, is it ridiculously hot there right now?
Yeah, it's well, it's funny. It gets ridiculously cold to be honest with you
Oh,
because we're all
really?
indoors and we all keep the AC as low as it can, and so we freeze our butts off all day. And then you walk outside and you're like, oh, it's not too bad. But then you spend like 5 more minutes outside. And you're like, okay, it's hot. Um, yeah. So unfortunately, right now is not the time to be in Phoenix.
But you like Arizona?
Yeah, um, there's just something about it. I never thought I would. I don't know. We moved here. Gosh, it's been. See again, me trying to remember dates. It's probably been over 15 years now, at least. It's been probably close to 20 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's been a while that I've been out here, but I've lived in different places in the U.S. And I remember first moving out here. I had already moved a few times when I was younger, and you just at that point I was thinking, oh, well, I've moved a few times, I could move again, and so I could envision myself, when I was older, kind of going wherever. But now that I've put down roots here, and I've got some family here as well, which is really important. And just the fact that it's such a wide open state, like I think it allows a lot of freedom, which is great. Like I can work in the city, but then over the weekend drive up into the forest, and it doesn't even look like the desert anymore, and that's only like an hour away. And so it's very inspirational actually for someone who's like an artist like me to have that chance to just unwind and relax compared to say some of the other places I've lived or some of the places I've seen.
Yeah, yeah. I'm was curious about like some of your inspirations, and it sounds like nature and just taking a break from it all, or what else kind of drives you?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's what it is. I mean, it's just like a sense of freedom and enjoying the moment. I think that's what it is. I mean, I think that's where some of my track titles come from too. Like again, just for a while is kind of a reference to like a brief moment of that melody and a brief moment of just appreciating what's happening around you at that time. And then I wrote another track called A Fleeting Glimpse that was like, gosh, a year or two prior to that. Similar idea. It was just kind of like a fleeting glimpse of like beauty. And I think that's what I think about a lot of times when I'm out hiking or if we're just watching a sunset or something. A lot of times music pops into mind. It's just something I guess that's what's tweaked in my head that makes me want to write music. Is it's always present.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm curious, what are you most proud of in your career and in your life?
Wow. The second part of that question is huge. um, in the career, gosh, I'd probably say making the switch and the commitment, like re-entering music with a focus back in 2015. You know, again, credit to my wife for kind of waking me up, but then kind of taking that and running with it and saying, all right, I'm going to do something that I'm not going to be ever unhappy about a track. I'm never not going to be like forced into something I don't want to do just because I need to try to, you know, raise my profile or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so far so good. You know, it's been a few years now and things have been going really well. It's kind of like a slow build, which I'm happy with, a slow burn. Things kind of just keep building on themselves. And I think that was the right decision. And so I'm really proud that I was able to kind of forge a new identity, a new sound that I was happy with. That seems to be working out for me. Because the well hasn't run dry. I mean, I've got all sorts of ideas that I can't wait to work on. But then in my life, gosh, I think just being happily married to my wife, to be honest with you. We've just passed 5 years, and she's been such a huge part of these past few years, of course, with the music. I mean, she's there every step of the way. She's been with me when we go to gigs. She's almost like my unofficial manager that I don't have to pay. But we've kind of made an adventure out of it, and that's been really fun and exciting. And I think she's embraced the whole idea of kind of, again, like enjoying the journey. Because sometimes it's a little stressful when I come home and I'm like, headphones on, I'm in my zone, and that's not very social. So she's been very supportive of that, and I think it's just, we've made it work, which is really cool. And I think we're in a good spot, and that's definitely something I can say I'm proud of in my life at this point.
Absolutely, that's definitely something to be proud of. I mean, that's your life there, and to have that balance and to work together to enjoy the journey together is just, it's a beautiful thing. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendan. I really appreciate your time. It's been super awesome to talk to you.
Thank you. It was a great chat, and thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I was blown away when you reached out, and I love Frisky, actually. I listen to it a lot, so I'm really excited to see how this goes, and thank you for the time.